Welcome back to the Perform podcast for episode 15. Today's going to be just a solo episode, so just one coach, not 2.5 coaches today. We're just going to be running through some of the stuff that I've been posting on social media. So as we've mentioned in the past, we're going to try and mix in a few of these shorter episodes where it's just one of us or maybe two of us just going through a small topic. Today, just going to be discussing some of the stuff that I've been posting on socials around assessments and testing and how, as coaches and athletes, we can make the most of these and how there's opportunities within our training to do so. So, starting off with, I posted how we can use a drop jump as an assessment for just general athletic qualities and how it can kind of paint a picture of an athlete and how we can use that information to then make training decisions. So if you're not aware, drop jump, pretty much you're just standing on a box, stepping off the box, or dropping off the box rather. And then as you hit the ground, we're trying to get up as high as we can off the ground, so jumping off the floor, but also trying to get as quick off the floor. So we're looking at that ability to produce a lot of force quickly and whether you have those elastic qualities to get up off the floor. So from there, this is when, obviously if you have access to something like force plates or like a jump mat or something like that, we can get a lot of information from that in terms of specific numbers like ground contact times, RSI, jump heights, that kind of thing. But I think this assessment as a whole is very useful because we can just, as coaches, we can just use our coach's eye and you can see when someone gets off the floor quick, you can hear how they attack the floor, and this gives us a lot of information about what the movement strategies of that athlete are. So from there, so if we don't have any equipment like or technologies to use, like just simply just using your coach's eye, even like if you film it slow-mo, you can kind of break down the frames, you can work out the ground contacts and stuff if you really want to. But I think just as a broad way of just having some level of assessment, it can be really useful. So it kind of, from there, as someone does the assessment, obviously making sure that they understand what they're supposed to be doing. So they're not just trying to jump as high as possible, but they're not, don't understand that they have to be quick off the floor. So making sure that the drill and exercise itself is explained first and foremost, but then from there we can separate an athlete into 4 different categories. So as I posted, like you kind of got a little quadrant. So we've got someone who can jump high, but they're not very quick off the floor. Someone who can jump quickly off the floor, but not very high. Someone who can't jump high or quickly off the floor, and then someone who can do both well. And again, no quantified numbers here. It's just like you kind of just see it. So you can see when someone is able to do that. So from each of those sections, then we can kind of dictate what strengths and weaknesses an athlete has. So if we're looking at that first quadrant, we've got someone who can jump quickly but not very high. So what that might tell us about the athlete is that they have good elastic qualities, so they're able to spring off the floor well, making use of that elastic energy and being able to get quick off the floor. But if they're not able to get very high as a result, they might need to just work on strength a little bit more so that they can produce more force and leverage that elastic ability that they have. So that kind of can shift our programming. Obviously, we don't want to neglect the elastic, like we don't just say, oh, sweet, they can do that. We're just going to neglect that. It just as we always talk about, it's not going all into one thing. It's just pushing and pulling how much resources we're going to be putting into a certain bucket. So for an athlete like this, we might just invest more of our time and effort into something like strength, as that's going to be probably going to give us the highest return on our investment. From there, we might have an athlete who can jump high, so they're able to get really high, but they're just not very quick off the floor. So this is pretty common for someone who spends a lot of time like with strength work, but they haven't done anything more ballistic in nature. They haven't really had much exposure to plyometrics or that kind of thing. So these type of athletes, like they're already strong, so they're able to produce a lot of force into the floor, but they're just maybe not able to do it quickly, or they just can't handle that collision of the floor, collision of their body, like hitting the floor and redirecting that momentum. So, so one is just going to be able to being able to teach that athlete So through plyometrics or jumping, how to produce force quickly, how to redirect momentum, and trying to build the elastic qualities. So they've already got that foundational strength for the most part if they can jump pretty high. So as how can we transition that into something a bit more quote unquote specific, being able to produce that force quickly. So power exercises, Olympic lift variations, and like loaded jumps, that kind of stuff is going to be good for teaching them how to do that. And then obviously we want to work on plyometrics for the ground contact side of things and being able to leverage those elastic abilities to then get high and quick off the floor. Then from there, with the remaining two, we've got someone who can't jump high or quickly off the floor, and then we've got someone who can jump high and quickly off the floor. Obviously for both of these scenarios, there's no clear cut, all right, we need to work on this, because they're just not very good at both, or they're already very good at both. So for someone who's already good at both, lucky you, congratulations, like you've completed athleticism. No. But for them, it's just kind of lean into their strengths. We want to work on everything still. So still building up some base strength, building up some of that elastic qualities through plyometrics and just continuing that exposure and building the intensity of those, power work, that kind of thing. But for an athlete like that, we might get more value out of more specific assessments, or obviously like as a whole, this assessment is like, and splitting it into just small 4 categories, and also from coach's eye, like it's very reductionist in nature. So we're just trying to boil it down to these very simple things. There's obviously so much more nuance and complexity that comes into this, but it's just a very good starting point. So for someone like that, if they are very good at both, now we need to dive deeper into what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses. You might look more specifically to positional things in their sport, how we can replicate those positions, and so on. So then we have someone who is going to be poor at both, and again, there's no clear-cut low-hanging fruit, but as we know, strength is going to be the underpinning quality to everything, so we definitely want to focus on strength, because at the very least, that's going to help them jump high, if not quick. But then it's really important for us to very early on try implement some level of plyometric and introduce some elastic things, because that progression of those qualities generally takes a little bit longer, versus strength can happen quite quickly, and working both concurrently is only going to help you transition the strength that you build into using it in that specific way, and you've been able to utilize it quickly and that kind of thing. So so strength is going to be super important, but from there we want to be able to get more specific in terms of the qualities that we're building. So as again, it's boiling this down to a very simple thing, but it also shows us that we can get a lot of information from something that's relatively simple like a drop jump. So we don't need fancy equipment, doesn't need to be super complex, just measuring something in some way, utilizing that coach's eye is super important, so that we can get more information. So for like diving into that a little bit further, is that training itself is an assessment. So we don't, I personally am definitely like across the board, like we might do some sort of assessment with the force plates and stuff when someone first comes to sign up with us. But the biggest thing I want to do is just get someone training as quickly as possible, and how they move through their exercises and everything is going to give us so much more information than an assessment. Because then you also have that, I can't remember the name of, but there's like some sort of psychological bias, bias isn't the right word. There's a like phenomenon that kind of happens like around assessments where, if people think they're being assessed, they're going to maybe perform in a slightly different way. They might feel the pressure of being assessed, that kind of thing. So just watching someone train is going to give you so much more information. And even with the drop jump assessment, if you can find a way to kind of hide the fact that it is an assessment, that's going to give you more information. Obviously, from just coaching it well is going to be the most important thing, but you're going to get so much more information when someone thinks they're just doing it, or observing someone more closely in their sport and how they move. So it's very important we pay attention to these details, and just because we've constructed the session and everything doesn't mean our job's done from there. We can constantly be getting information, adjusting things on the fly. So watching training, watching how someone executes certain exercises. So whether it's I have someone in their first couple of sessions, we're just going to get them through some sort of plyometrics. That might tell me a lot about their strategies of how they move. If someone's very slow off the floor, it's like, sweet, they just need more exposure to this. Is it a skill issue? Is it a physical quality issue? That kind of thing. And then as someone moves through different exercises, is there mobility restrictions as they're going through squat or some sort of hinge? Is this, again, is it a skill issue? Do they not understand how to perform the exercise? Or is there a physical limitation that we need to maybe address? Then in between sets, you might work on like specific mobility in between and see if that makes a difference. Like there's so many things that we can do on the fly as coaches that it's very important to be observant of your training. And then this is just going to constantly give you more information as this continuous assessment, and that you can make adjustments to your programming for the athlete, and it just makes it so much better overall. And then the other part of assessments is that obviously we might do some more like performance-based assessment to give us indications on whether we're improving over time. So obviously we've got the combine coming up, so we use that as an opportunity. So combine number 1 is like our initial testing at the start of the off-season block, and then we have our combine number 2, which is like the retesting, and kind of from there we get some data points of how that training block has progressed. Have they made improvements in the areas that we've wanted to? Then as coaches we can reflect on our programming and go, hey, did we get what we thought we would? So it just gives us more information from there. But that's just because we have these specific days doesn't mean they're the only chances we have of testing athletes. So within our training, there's always going to be opportunities for testing, opportunities to see if there's improvement. So, and for the most part, this also gets more out of your training sessions because it just drives intent, output, creates a bit of competition, whether it's between yourself trying to beat previous scores or between athletes, which is always like the best thing you can do is just create that environment. So again, we don't need fancy equipment, but if you have access to something like force plates, jump mat, things like that, we can utilize those within sessions. So I always like to, if I'm supersetting or having some sort of counter movement jump or drop jump or something within my session, I might do one like the first set or something like that every time just on the force plates. Then we just get weekly data of how they're trending, gives us more information, more data points to work with, or something like just a vertical jump. We've got the Vertec in the gym, or you might have something, even if you just hang something from the roof, try touch it, measure how high that is, try make it a little bit higher each time, doing something like broad jumps, measuring the distance of your broad jump. Even if it's not perfect, like box jumps, did you jump onto a higher box? Like obviously, is it just because you got more hip mobility, you lifted your feet up higher? But it's like cool, like as an athlete, you feel like you've made progress because you've jumped onto a higher box. Like maybe there's a psychological thing there, it just feels like progress. So there's little things that we can track along the way, and there's no changes to our training. Like I'm still doing broad jumps regardless. It might be like a single effort broad jump, might be single leg broad jump, might be continuous broad jumps where we're trying to get 3. So many options that we're already doing within our training, but now we can measure it in a way and then keep track of this over the course of a few weeks and see if we're improving, revisit it in a month's time, that kind of thing. It just gives us more data points to see whether what we're doing is working, and if we need to make any adjustments. It doesn't have to be like a specific day. But then also there's value in having that too. But again, if people feel like they've been assessed or they have testing, they might put pressure on themselves, versus if you're just embedding this within your training already, you're going to get way more frequent data points, which is going to tell you more information over the course of 8 to 12 weeks or over the course of a season or something like that. But it's just part of their training, so they don't feel like they're being assessed, like they don't need to do anything different. They take that pressure off themselves because they're just training. So embedding that within your training, trying to set up opportunities for competition, like especially jumps is like a fantastic way, super easy, don't really need any technology to be able to do that well. Then some other ways is measuring like bar velocity. So simple apps on your phone like Metric VBT, we use a fair bit. Gives you retrospective like bar speeds, so that can be super useful, especially when we're trying to push more like that power side of things, when we're really trying to chase a certain speed. But then again, you can also get technologies like bar velocity trackers, that kind of thing. But this can help objectify the numbers, the speeds that you're lifting, and again is a means for tracking progress as well. So if I lift 80 kilos at 1 meters per second, and then I am able to lift 90 kilos at 1 meters per second, that is progress because I'm able to lift more weight at the same speed. Or if I lift 80 kilos at 1 meters per second and then I lift 80 kilos at 1.2 meters per second, I've made progress because I'm able to move that same load faster. So it's a way of, again, creating some competition. Maybe between athletes, you might do like X% of body weight. They've got to try and move it at a certain speed to try and level the playing fields. But there's so many ways, and it's also a good way of like really trying to stay, when we're not working on max strength or something like that, when we're trying to scale the load back. Some people will go, oh no, but like I could lift heavier. So well, no, try lift it faster. So there's different elements from the training side of things that can be super helpful too. Then if you're doing like sprint, change of direction work, if you have access to some sort of speed gates, timing gates, something like that, can be great for, again, tracking progress over time, but also creating a bit of competition within that. But if you don't have access to that, even just like a stopwatch, like it's not perfect, but you can create that element of competition, get like a rough guide of where you're at. Are you tracking as you think you should? And then lastly, obviously strength numbers. This is probably the easiest one to track, and so many people get hell-bent on like, I need to do a 1RM to know if I've gotten stronger. But we have so many good formulas out there now that can predict 1RMs based on rep maxes. Hitting is obviously not going to be super accurate, but I think strength is just the easiest one to know. Like, am I lifting more weight for the same amount of reps? Am I lifting more weight in total? Like, if I did 80 kilos for 5 reps, 6 weeks ago, and now I can do 100 kilos for 5 reps, like you've probably gotten stronger. You don't need to do a 1 rep max to figure out whether you've gotten stronger or not. So just like keeping track, like the whole theme of all these things is just measuring your training, whether that's in a notebook, like we use training apps, so it's going to keep track of it for you over time. But all of this stuff, like you don't need fancy equipment, you don't need don't need to overcomplicate it. You don't need to change up your training a whole lot. It's just measuring stuff, keeping track of things, and revisiting, see where you're progressing, whether things are working as you think they should. So whether it's something as simple as a drop jump assessment, and we're using our coach's eye, simple as tracking weights over time. Am I getting stronger in this exercise as I think I should? Tracking jump height on a counter movement jump, like trying to touch something, jumping over an obstacle. Can I jump over something higher than previously? There's so many opportunities for testing, competition, and assessment within your training. So as an athlete yourself, if you're doing your own training, how can you compete against yourself to try push yourself to be better? The best way is just like, having a logbook of some sort, or if you have some way of tracking your training, trying to beat what you did previously. And as coaches, like constantly observing closely, we can see the athletes' movement strategies, how they're trying to do something. And that's just going to give us so much information and where we need to tailor an athlete's program to get them towards their goals and what they want to achieve. So without rambling too much more, hopefully I've covered all those kind of topics and given you a little bit more insight into the thought processes there and how you can then take that away in your own training, or as coaches, like implementing that into your programs. If you have any questions, obviously feel free to reach out, and until next time, if there's any, again, as always, if there's any topics that you would like us to cover on the podcast, if you'd prefer to hear Keith or Isaac's voice instead of mine, I don't blame you at all. But send us messages if you can. It's super helpful as always if you've made it this far to just leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you're listening to, subscribe to it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Subscribe to our YouTube channel. I think we've just ticked over 500, which is awesome. So thank you to everyone who has subscribed. If you haven't, please do so. Not only do we have the podcast up there, we've got some other short form kind of videos. We've got an extensive exercise library as well. So, there's plenty of new things to be seen there. Isaac goes full Bosch, so you can find some cool exercises. Dig into the comments on some of those exercises because they are fantastic and very entertaining. But yeah, apart from that, thank you, and we'll see you next time.